Hello, family. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Regina Martins moved through the large halls of the Martins estate with quiet precision. To outsiders, she was simply the CEO's wife, gracious, elegant, and supportive. But behind the scenes, she was the steady hand steering the ship. From organizing investor meetings to drafting strategic proposals Vincent would later present as his own, Regina poured herself into every corner of her husband's legacy. She never sought applause. It was enough to see Vincent succeed. Yet lately, something had begun to flicker at the edge of her peace. She noticed him glancing at his phone too often, whispering behind closed doors, staying late at the office more frequently. She told herself it was just stress. Business was demanding. And so, she smiled through the doubt, pushing it down like she always did. One evening, as they sat at dinner, and Regina casually mentioned a shift in company logistics that she had subtly advised, Vincent waved her off. "Let the professionals handle it, Gina," he said, not looking up from his phone. The words stung, not because of what he said, but how he said it, with that casual dismissal that stripped her of her worth. She reached for her wine glass, her fingers trembling slightly. "I thought I was one of the professionals," she replied softly. He looked at her briefly, then shrugged. "Of course you are. I didn't mean it like that." But the damage was done. That night, as Vincent retreated to his study with his ever-buzzing phone, Regina sat alone on their shared bed, wondering when exactly her name stopped appearing in his plans. The house had grown strangely silent, though not for lack of activity. Vincent still left every morning in tailored suits, still returned every night, but something had shifted, an emptiness in his eyes, a stiffness in his hugs, if he gave them at all. Regina began noticing the subtle absences, business trips that weren't discussed, meetings she was once included in now held without her. One evening, she stood by the kitchen archway, watching him from behind as he took a call in hushed tones on the balcony. "No, she doesn't know. Don't worry about her," he whispered. Her chest clenched. She didn't confront him, not yet. She wasn't ready to hear the confirmation of what her heart already feared. Instead, she turned away quietly and began documenting his patterns like a scientist, observing a subject, detached, methodical, wounded. At night, he would sleep with his phone under his pillow. Once, when it buzzed after midnight and he turned his back to answer it, Regina sat up in bed, eyes wide open. The light from the screen illuminated his face, smiling faintly, a softness she hadn't seen directed at her in months. "You should get some rest," she murmured. He jumped, startled. "Didn't realize you were awake," he mumbled, before sliding the phone into his pocket and disappearing into the bathroom. The door clicked shut behind him, and she listened to the running water, masking the tone of his voice. The next day, she wore red lipstick, his favorite, but he barely noticed. When he finally glanced at her, it was quick, like an afterthought. "You're going somewhere?" he asked. "No," she replied with a tight smile. "Just wanted to remember how it feels to be seen." It was a lazy Saturday afternoon when it finally happened, unmistakable, undeniable. Regina had just finished folding laundry in their bedroom when Vincent's phone, left charging on the dresser, vibrated with a message. She wasn't the type to pry, but the screen lit up again, and again. Finally, curiosity met pain at the crossroads of instinct, and she picked it up. The message read, "Missed last night already. Still tasting you. When can we do it again?" It was signed with a red lipstick kiss emoji and the name Sabrina. Her hands froze. The cotton blouse she held slipped from her fingers onto the floor. She stood there for minutes, unmoving, staring at the screen like it might change its truth if she stared long enough. But it didn't. It remained there, blinking, proof that everything she had feared was real. When Vincent returned from his jog, Regina was sitting quietly on the bed. She looked up at him as he entered, her face unreadable. He removed his earbuds and smiled faintly. "You okay?" She held up the phone in one hand, the message displayed like a verdict. "You left your heart on the dresser," she said flatly. His smile faltered. Silence sat heavy between them. He reached for the phone, but she pulled it back. "How long, Vincent?" she asked. Is it just text messages, or are there hotel keys too? He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. It's complicated, he muttered. She stood, her voice low and trembling. It's betrayal, Vincent. That's what it is. But thank you for not even having the decency to lie well. She walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind her, leaving him to face the wreckage he created. The next morning, Regina called Rebecca. Her voice cracked only once during the entire call. I need you, she said simply. Within the hour, Rebecca was at the house, wrapping Regina in a hug that felt warmer than anything Vincent had offered in weeks. They sat in the living room, tea untouched, as Regina laid out the evidence, what she saw, what she heard, what she knew in her gut but had long denied. Rebecca's face went from sympathy to fury. You can't let him treat you like this, she snapped. You've poured your life into him, into that company. He gets the credit, and now he's giving his body to someone else? Regina looked down at her hands. I just needed to be sure before I confront him. Now I am. Rebecca reached for her hand. Then don't just confront him, corner him. Make him feel what it's like to underestimate you. Regina smiled weakly. I'm not ready to fight him yet, Bex. I don't know what I'm fighting for anymore. Rebecca squeezed her hand tighter. You're fighting for the woman you were before he made you small. You're fighting for your mind, your value, your peace. He doesn't get to rewrite your story. The words settled like seeds in fertile soil. Regina didn't say anything more that day, but she thought about those words late into the night. She wasn't going to confront Vincent with tears anymore. She was going to gather her truth and wait. Sabrina might have stepped into her marriage, but she hadn't yet checked whose name would matter in the end. And Regina, quiet as she seemed, was not the kind of woman who stayed defeated. The fundraising gala was packed with executives, board members, and socialites, all swirling around in luxury and ambition. Regina arrived in a simple but elegant navy blue gown, hair swept back in a clean chignon, her face calm, unreadable. She didn't come to be seen, she came to observe. Vincent arrived fashionably late, and not alone. On his arm, dressed in a red velvet dress cut too low for the occasion, was Sabrina. Her arrival was like a dropped match in a room full of gas. Whispers followed them. Eyes darted from Regina to the couple and back again. As they walked past Regina's table, Sabrina made sure to pause, just long enough to lock eyes with her. Lovely evening, she said sweetly, her lips curling in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It's about time some of us got the spotlight. Regina simply nodded. Shadows are where strength is born, she replied softly. The entire evening felt like a performance, one Vincent didn't even know he was starring in. He avoided Regina's gaze from across the room, but she wasn't looking for his eyes anymore. She had already seen enough. What struck her wasn't his betrayal, it was his blindness. He was holding the hand of a woman who didn't care about legacy, reputation, or foundation. But what Sabrina lacked in depth, she made up for in arrogance. By the end of the night, Sabrina had introduced herself to nearly every board member, offering flirtatious winks and promising smiles. Regina stood quietly beside the dessert table, watching Sabrina drape herself over Vincent's world like cheap perfume. Rebecca joined her with a glass of champagne. She thinks it's all hers now, Rebecca muttered. Regina responded with a soft smile. Let her believe it. Sometimes the loudest ones are easiest to silence. Dominic's breathing was heavier now, more labored than before. The hospital room was filled with machines that beeped steadily, mocking the quiet decline of a once powerful man. Gina sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his. She hadn't planned to stay long, but when she saw how fragile he looked, thinner, paler, diminished, she couldn't leave. You look tired, she whispered. Dominic gave a raspy chuckle. Tired of pretending I'm not dying, he murmured. But I'm glad you came. She adjusted his blanket with care. You've always been kind to me. His eyes shifted to hers, sharp despite the shadows under them. Because you never needed to shout to be heard. I noticed everything, Regina, even when others pretended not to. That day, they didn't talk about Vincent. They spoke about the company's early days, the sacrifices, and how Regina used to work overtime behind the scenes without ever asking for credit. You were the real strategist, Dominic said, his voice faint but firm, and the only one I trusted to do the right thing, even when no one was watching. Tears welled in Regina's eyes, but she blinked them back. "You don't have to say that now," he smiled. "I have to say it because it's now." When a nurse entered with medication, Regina stood to leave, but Dominic caught her wrist with surprising strength. "Stay just a bit longer," he whispered. "The world out there is already forgetting me. You never did." Regina sat again, her heart aching in places she hadn't realized were still vulnerable. Late one evening, Regina found herself once again in Dominic's room, the lights dim, the mood reflective. He was weaker now, and yet his mind was sharper than ever, more focused, like a man racing against time. "I don't have many days left," he confessed, his voice a soft echo. "But I need to make sure the company doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Vincent, he's lost his compass." Regina swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "He still loves you," she offered, though the words felt hollow. Dominic gave a tired smile. Love without respect is empty. And he respects Sabrina more than he listens to reason. He turned slowly toward the nightstand and motioned to a manila envelope tucked inside the drawer. "That envelope will make sense one day. Jordan knows what to do with it." Regina stared at it for a moment, her fingers trembling as she touched its edge, but didn't open it. "What's in it?" she asked. Dominic coughed gently before answering. "Insurance, for the legacy I built, and the woman who kept it breathing when my son was too blind to see her." Regina felt her throat tighten. "You don't have to give me anything." He shook his head. "I already did. I'm just telling you now so you know it wasn't an accident." The room fell into silence again, broken only by the steady beeping of his heart monitor. As she prepared to leave, Dominic looked at her one last time. "You may not carry the Martins' bloodline, but you carry its dignity. And that matters more." Regina walked out of the hospital with tears on her face, but her back straight, her spirit slowly rising. The morning after Dominic's final lucid conversation, Jordan arrived at his private office carrying a sealed envelope marked with Dominic's initials and a handwritten instruction. To be opened at the next annual board meeting, no sooner. Jordan hesitated only briefly before locking it into the company's legal archive vault, a space only accessible by him and Dominic's personal security team. He didn't need to know what was inside to understand its importance. Dominic had made it clear this envelope was more than paperwork. It was legacy. As Jordan exited the archive room, he paused and looked back, as if silently honoring the man who'd trusted him with secrets meant to change lives. He then picked up his phone and sent a message to Regina. "It's done. Your time will come. Be still until then." Regina read the message while seated in her garden, sunlight filtering through leaves overhead. Her fingers hovered over the screen, wanting to respond but unsure what to say. Jordan had been loyal to Dominic, and by extension, to her. She had no idea what the envelope contained, but she trusted Dominic's foresight more than she trusted her own emotions these days. "What do I do until then?" she whispered to herself. The breeze rustled the trees, almost like an answer. Just as she tucked the phone away, Vincent's car pulled up into the driveway. He walked in with a paper bag and a stiff smile. "Thought I'd bring breakfast," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Guilt makes you generous now?" He flinched but said nothing. As he walked past her, she whispered, "Tell your new advisor, power is heavier than it looks." He turned sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" But Regina simply stood, walked into the house, and left him standing under the sun, puzzled. Sabrina's integration into the company was swift and audacious. Within weeks, she went from Vincent's strategic advisor to attending executive meetings, offering fresh insights. It sounded more like social media captions than strategy. Staff whispered, but no one dared question her, not when Vincent had clearly handed her the keys to the floor. Sabrina even redecorated the main office. Regina's minimalist influence, cool tones, clean lines, was erased in favor of gaudy gold accents and crystal lamps. In the lobby, Sabrina had the nerve to replace a framed company mission statement Regina had written years ago with a print that read, "Success isn't inherited, it's claimed." When Rebecca visited the office to pick up personal items for Regina, she stood under that frame for a long moment, her jaw clenched. "She's not just claiming space," she muttered. "She's rewriting history." Inside the executive suite, Sabrina now sat comfortably in what used to be Regina's quiet workspace, feet up on the table, flipping through design catalogs. Vincent walked in, weary from back-to-back meetings. "You redecorated already?" he asked, looking around. "Of course," she smiled sweetly. "You said we're starting fresh, and fresh needs sparkle." Vincent chuckled nervously. "I didn't mean erase everything." Sabrina's smile faded. "Your father's time is over. This is our era now." Her words carried the confidence of someone who had tasted too much power too quickly. Meanwhile, Regina stayed quiet in the background, never returning to the office, never contesting the changes. But behind the scenes, she was meeting with Jordan weekly, learning, watching, waiting. She didn't need an office to hold power. She already had the one thing Sabrina didn't even know existed: leverage. The official notice was brief and clinical. Effective immediately, Mrs. Regina Martin's consultancy role with Martin's Global Holdings has been dissolved. We thank her for her service and contribution. The email landed in her inbox at 10:03 a.m. on a Thursday. No phone call, no warning, no farewell. Regina sat at her dining table, reading it twice before her fingers moved. She closed her laptop, stood up, and walked to her wardrobe, selecting a cream blouse and charcoal trousers. If she was going to be dismissed, she would at least look like a woman who commanded dignity on her way out. At the company lobby, her access card was already deactivated. She waited calmly as the receptionist called Vincent's assistant. A junior manager escorted her upstairs, avoiding eye contact the entire time. At her former office, Sabrina was already there, feigning surprise. "Oh, awkward," she said, twirling a pen. "You didn't get the memo?" Regina said nothing, walked over to her bookshelf, and began placing her files into a box she had brought herself. Sabrina leaned forward. "Look, no hard feelings. The company needs vision now, energy. Not nostalgia." Regina turned to her, eyes steady. "Vision without history is blindness, Sabrina. I hope you know what you're walking into." Sabrina laughed. "Sweetheart, I'm running this place. You lost everything." At that, Regina smiled for the first time that day. A small, unsettling smile. "You should really check who owns the lights you just turned on." And with that, she picked up her box and walked out without another word, leaving the younger woman staring, momentarily shaken without knowing why. The bedroom felt colder now, not because of the temperature, but because of the space Vincent had left behind. His side of the bed remained untouched for days, as though it were waiting for a man who no longer belonged there. Regina didn't cry. Not that night, not the night after. What pierced her most wasn't his absence. It was how peaceful the room had become without his distractions, his lies, his excuses. She placed his cufflinks in a drawer, not out of sentiment, but to reclaim her space. When Rebecca visited later that week, she paused at the doorway. "Where's he been staying?" she asked. Regina folded a blouse before responding. "In the guest house. Claims he needs mental clarity." Rebecca scoffed. Mental clarity or a clear path to her bed? Later that evening, Vincent knocked softly before entering. He avoided eye contact as he hovered near the doorway. "I thought I should give you space," he murmured. Regina didn't look up from the book she was reading. "You weren't giving me space. You were giving her time." He stiffened. "I didn't mean for things to go this far." Regina closed the book slowly and met his gaze. "You never mean to fall, Vincent. You just don't care who you land on." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. "You moved your things out of this room. Don't think you can walk back in when it suits you." She pointed to the door. "Close it on your way out. This room has already healed more without you." At the company headquarters, the once steady rhythm of productivity had given way to a murmur of unrest. Staff meetings were now led by Sabrina, whose charm wore thin under the weight of her ignorance. She made impulsive decisions, disregarded project timelines, and shut down departments that didn't excite her. Vincent, caught in a whirlwind of flattery and stress, began losing the confidence of even his most loyal executives. "Why did we halt the London rollout?" one director asked during a strategy session. Sabrina waved a manicured hand dismissively. "I just didn't vibe with the logo. We need to rebrand, make it sexy." The room fell silent. Vincent rubbed his temples, too proud to reverse her call and too uncertain to defend her. Meanwhile, rumors rippled like tremors through the corridors. Some said Regina had been forced out. Others whispered she left because she knew the company's fate was spiraling. Only Jordan remained impassive, his presence as deliberate as a ticking clock. When a junior analyst nervously approached him in the elevator and asked, "Is it true Mrs. Regina's gone for good?" Jordan only replied, "You'd be surprised what returns when it's needed most." In Vincent's office, Sabrina was already planning a press release to position herself as co-chair. "Let's show the world we're the future," she said, holding up mock campaign photos of her sitting behind the CEO's desk. Vincent forced a smile, but in his gut something churned. The empire he thought he controlled suddenly felt like a cage, and he wasn't the one holding the key. Regina stood at her mother's grave for the first time in months, the soil damp from the morning's rain. She knelt, brushing off fallen leaves from the headstone, her fingers lingering on the engraved words. She raised queens in silence. The cemetery was quiet, save for the rustling of nearby trees. "Mama," she whispered, voice trembling, "I stayed because I believed in him, because I didn't want to be the woman who left too soon." A tear slipped down her cheek. "But now I understand I wasn't supposed to walk behind him. I was meant to walk ahead, just like you did." She closed her eyes, remembering her mother's hands, always working, always soft, always strong. In that silence, something inside Regina solidified. Her heartbreak didn't weaken her, it refined her. She sat for a while, knees curled beneath her, speaking aloud the thoughts she had never dared confess. "He said I lost everything, Mama, but I found more truth in this pain than I ever did in his praise." The sun pierced through the clouds as if to bless her confession. Standing up, she dusted her knees and took a deep breath. "I am not what they think I am, and when the time comes, they'll see." She placed a single white lily on the grave, kissed her fingertips, and touched the marble. As she turned to leave, her steps felt steadier. This wasn't a farewell to grief, it was a vow. She would no longer allow anyone, especially Vincent or Sabrina, to decide her value. Regina walked away, not from her past, but into her rise. The Martins Foundation annual gala was held in the city's grandest hotel ballroom, flooded with reporters, shareholders, and business elites. It was Regina's first major public event since her abrupt dismissal, and though her name had vanished from invitations, her presence didn't go unnoticed. She arrived in a sleek emerald dress that hugged her frame with dignity, her expression composed, her silence commanding. As she moved through the crowd, people whispered, some out of pity, others in shame. Yet it wasn't Regina who drew the spotlight. It was the arrival of Vincent and Sabrina, hand in hand, their coordinated outfits screaming new power couple. Photographers clamored. Reporters surged forward. Regina watched from the side, her hands folded around a glass of sparkling water. Sabrina, spotting Regina across the hall, leaned toward Vincent and whispered, "Let's greet her. It'll send a message." Vincent hesitated. "Let's not do this here," he murmured, but Sabrina was already striding over. "Regina," she called, loud enough for others to hear. The crowd parted like a curtain. Regina turned slowly. "Sabrina," she replied, voice even. And Vincent, what a colorful entrance. Sabrina gave a rehearsed laugh. "We just wanted to say no hard feelings. Sometimes the crown passes to the next queen." Regina's eyes didn't flinch. "Darling," she said gently, "you mistook a lone tiara for a crown. Careful, some ornaments cut when they fall." Around them, the air shifted. Sabrina's smile flickered, and Vincent looked away. Regina returned to her table, unmoved. The crowd didn't know it, but the war had already begun, and the wrong queen had laughed too soon. Rebecca stormed into Vincent's office uninvited the following Monday, heels clicking like war drums. "You have 5 minutes before I forget you were once human," she snapped. Vincent looked up, startled. "Rebecca, this isn't your business." She slammed a printed internal memo on his desk. It was the final confirmation that Regina's consultancy privileges had been fully revoked. "Not my business." "I watched Regina hold your name above her own for nearly a decade. She shielded your flaws, propped up your career, and you repay her with silence and scandal." Vincent leaned back, weary. "You think I wanted this to happen like this?" Rebecca didn't flinch. "No, Vincent, I think you didn't want to own it at all." He stood, hands in his pockets. "You think I haven't struggled with this?" Rebecca narrowed her eyes. "No, you haven't struggled. You've escaped accountability. There's a difference." He opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off. You let a woman who hasn't built a single thing tear apart the one person who built everything around you. And you watch it happen like a spectator. Vincent lowered his gaze. I didn't expect it to spiral like this. Rebecca took a step closer, her voice low now. Regina may never say it, but you broke something eternal. When the reckoning comes, don't act surprised when it's your own mirror that shatters. She turned and walked out without another word, leaving Vincent to stare at the documents on his desk, documents that spelled out everything he thought he controlled, slipping beyond his reach. It was supposed to be a quick stop. Regina had come to pick up some forgotten documents, legal blueprints she had drawn up months ago. But the moment she stepped into the glass-paneled lobby, the energy shifted. Staff members glanced up, unsure how to greet her now. She kept her head high. As she reached the reception, Sabrina descended the central staircase, flanked by two interns like a self-declared monarch. Well, well, Sabrina smirked loudly. Didn't expect to see you wandering these halls. Regina turned, lips pressed into a quiet line. I'm here to collect what belongs to me. Sabrina laughed, arms crossed. You lost everything, Regina. Accept it. Walk away before I help you crawl. The insult hung in the air like smoke. Several employees looked up from their screens, uneasy. Regina tilted her head, her voice low but razor sharp. Careful what you laugh at, Sabrina. You're standing on borrowed ground, and some foundations don't warn before they crumble. Sabrina blinked, clearly thrown off, but recovered with a scoff. You think threats scare me? Regina moved closer, just enough for only Sabrina to hear her next words. Not threats, warnings. Learn the difference. And check your reflection next time. Sometimes glass shows more than your own face. Without waiting for a reply, Regina turned and exited with grace. Behind her, Sabrina's laughter had faded, replaced by a silence she didn't know how to wear. The house was still that night, so quiet, even the ticking wall clock seemed cruel. Regina had just returned from the company building, where Sabrina's words had clawed at her dignity in front of passive onlookers. She set her bag down slowly, walked into the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water with trembling hands. But she couldn't drink. Her knees buckled before she even realized it, and she sank to the cold marble floor, tears pouring from eyes that had held back for far too long. Not just because of the betrayal or the humiliation, but because everything she had built, given, and nurtured had been trampled by the very people who once owed her their breath. Her sobs were not loud, but they were wrenching, deep body-shaking gasps that curled her inward like a wilted flower. For the first time, she whispered the words she never dared speak aloud. Maybe I wasn't enough. The silence didn't answer, but just then, a soft chime rang, her phone lit up with a message from Jordan. Board meeting scheduled. Envelope to be opened. She stared at the message through blurred eyes. Slowly, her breathing began to even. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, stood shakily, and whispered again, but this time not with sorrow. Maybe I was more than they deserved. She walked to the mirror, her eyes swollen but burning with a quiet new fire. That breakdown wasn't a collapse. It was a release. And in that release, something inside her had been born, sharp, sure, and no longer waiting to be rescued. The following morning, Regina met Jordan in a small private lounge of a discreet law firm on the outskirts of town. He placed a black leather folder between them on the table and slid it toward her. Everything is in place, he said firmly. Dominic was meticulous. You're not just mentioned, you're entrusted. Regina's fingers hovered over the folder but didn't open it. When? She asked. Jordan tapped his pen twice before replying, annual board meeting. 2 weeks from now. Until then, not a word to anyone. Let them think they've won. Regina gave a soft nod. It's what he wanted, she murmured. But it feels strange, holding something so powerful in silence. Jordan gave a small, knowing smile. Power held in silence, that's the loudest kind. As she left the building, the wind caught her scarf and whipped it behind her like a cape. For the first time in months, she felt like she was walking towards something instead of away from it. She didn't need to storm into rooms or reclaim offices. She already held the future in her hands. And no one, not Vincent, not Sabrina, not even the board, knew what was coming. That night, she made a quiet dinner for herself, lit 2 candles, and sat in the same seat where she had once cried into cold food. She raised a glass of red wine and whispered, "To timing." Across the city, Sabrina held her own glass, blissfully unaware, toasting to a rain that was never hers to begin with. Vincent stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, admiring the new limited edition watch on his wrist, a gift from Sabrina after her successful campaign with the PR team. The media had begun referring to her as a rising powerhouse. He grinned. "We're controlling the narrative," he said aloud to himself. Moments later, he joined Sabrina in the car. "You know, Regina's not coming back, right?" he said smugly. "She's too proud. She's gone." Sabrina laughed. "Let's just hope she stays that way. It's embarrassing how she keeps showing up like some relic of the past." Vincent smirked. "She doesn't know when to let go. She was never built for this level of ambition." Neither of them noticed the driver's subtle glance through the mirror. He'd been with the Martins long before Sabrina's heels ever echoed in that house. Later that afternoon, Vincent received a discreet envelope from the board secretary, an official notice for the annual meeting. He skimmed it and chuckled. "Routine formality," he told Sabrina. "We'll just use it to make your role official." Sabrina clapped with glee. Finally, co-chair. Vincent leaned back in his chair and sighed. Regina's name will never be mentioned again. But what they didn't know was that Regina's name was not only in the room, they'd soon find it engraved at the top of the company's ownership ledger. Arrogance made them blind. And in that blindness, they had walked directly toward a revelation that would redraw the lines of power forever. Regina stood at her window, the sky painted in the bruised colors of dusk, as Jordan's message pinged. "The invitations have gone out. 2 days. Be ready." She exhaled slowly, pressing her hand to her chest to calm the storm brewing within her. The boardroom was the very place she had once sat beside Vincent, drafting strategies, pitching ideas behind the scenes. Now she would return not as his shadow, but as the one name they never expected. Across town, Vincent received his own invitation and tossed it onto the table like it was routine. "Annual meeting shouldn't take long," he muttered to Sabrina, who was busy practicing her speech in front of a mirror. "Do you think I should open with a joke?" she asked. "Something about feminine leadership shaking the table." Vincent gave a low laugh. "Say whatever you want. By the time it's over, they'll only remember you." Meanwhile, the company's senior executives were abuzz. Something felt off. The invitation was worded differently this year, formal, cryptic, and stamped with Dominic's private seal. Some whispered that a hidden clause was being triggered. Others dismissed it as ceremony. Rebecca, sitting in her office far from the board's headquarters, read her copy and smiled faintly. She called Regina immediately. "You've got them all in a daze," she said. "Sabrina's probably planning her victory strut." Regina, seated calmly in her reading room, replied, "Let her strut. I'm not coming to march. I'm coming to end a parade that was never hers." Her voice carried no rage, only precision. The sword had already been sharpened. Now, it was time to remove it from the sheath. The night before the meeting, Regina prepared herself in quiet solitude. She laid out a simple, sharply tailored black suit and polished her heels, not for flair, but for assertion. Every movement was deliberate, ceremonial. Rebecca arrived that evening with a bottle of wine and a knowing smile. "Tomorrow's the storm," she said, settling into the couch. "You nervous?" Regina shook her head. "No, I'm grateful." Rebecca raised a brow. "For what?" "The betrayal." Regina took a deep breath. "For the clarity. For the silence that showed me who I was without applause. For the chance to reclaim what was never truly lost." The two women sat in thoughtful quiet as the clock ticked toward midnight, one sipping wine, the other sipping stillness. At the Martins' estate, the mood was giddy. Sabrina had selected a custom cream pantsuit and ordered a photographer to capture her arrival. Vincent, sipping whiskey, barely glanced up from his laptop. "Don't overdo it," he muttered. Sabrina twirled in the mirror. "You're just not used to women being prepared to lead." Vincent smirked. "Just don't treat it like a beauty pageant." She rolled her eyes. "Please, this company needs a new face, and tomorrow they'll see it's mine." He raised his glass in a half-hearted toast. "To our next chapter." But even as the glasses clinked, a subtle unease settled between them, too faint to name, but heavy enough to linger. Power was shifting, and somewhere They both sensed they might not be the ones holding it much longer. The boardroom gleamed beneath ceiling-length glass panels as suited executives filed in, each carrying murmurs and curiosity. At exactly 9 a.m., the large double doors swung open, and in walked Sabrina, flanked by a PR assistant and a personal photographer. Her heels echoed confidently on the marble floor. She wore her cream suit with exaggerated pride, pausing just long enough for the cameras to flash. "Morning, gentlemen," she beamed. "Let's make history today." Vincent followed closely, nodding politely to the board. Some smiled back, most just stared. Jordan sat at the head of the table, calm as a mountain. "We'll begin shortly," he announced. Sabrina leaned toward Vincent and whispered, "She's not here yet. Coward." Vincent chuckled. Maybe she finally got tired of losing. Just then, the doors opened again, this time with no fanfare. Regina stepped in, dressed in black, no entourage, no noise. But the room shifted instantly. Eyes turned, back straightened. Even Sabrina's smirk froze, only for a second. Regina took the seat directly across from her husband, her gaze steady, her demeanor impenetrable. Jordan rose. "We are now in session." As files were passed around and the agenda distributed, Sabrina leaned toward Vincent again. "She's here to watch, nothing more." Vincent nodded. "Let her." But inside, his pulse quickened. Regina hadn't walked into that room like a woman seeking closure. She had walked in like a verdict dressed in silence. And they were about to hear the judgment they never saw coming. Jordan rose from his seat with a calm authority that silenced the shuffle of papers and murmurs of expectation. "Before we proceed with the formal agenda," he began, "I've been instructed to execute the final wishes of the late Dominic Martins, our founder." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope, worn at the edges, bearing Dominic's personal seal. The room tensed. Vincent leaned back lazily, arms folded. "Why now?" he asked with a forced grin. Jordan didn't blink. "Because now is the time your father set, and no one, not even his son, can change that." Sabrina rolled her eyes. "Can we skip the theatrics?" she muttered. Jordan sliced the envelope open and pulled out a single typed page, marked with a handwritten note at the bottom. His voice was clear, deliberate. "This letter outlines Dominic Martin's final directive concerning company ownership, effective immediately upon the reading." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Board members straightened in their seats, sensing something they hadn't anticipated. Regina didn't flinch. She sat motionless, hands folded in her lap, her gaze locked on the letter as though she'd read it before in a dream. Jordan read aloud, "To those who continue the Martins' legacy, let this letter remind you that power is not inherited, it is entrusted. I hereby transfer full and irrevocable ownership of Martins Global Holdings to my daughter-in-law, Regina Martins, whose vision and loyalty have been the company's true compass, effective as of the date of my death." The room went still. No one moved. Vincent's mouth parted slightly, his breath caught in his throat. Sabrina stood up, voice shrill. "This is a joke, right? A twisted farewell prank." Jordan didn't even look at her. "The shares have already been transferred. The board has been notified. This is binding." Jordan carefully placed the letter on the table and pulled out a small USB drive. "Attached is a video message," he said. The screen behind the board table flickered to life, and Dominic's face appeared, older, paler, but unmistakably lucid. The room fell into reverent silence. "If you're watching this," Dominic began, "I'm no longer here. And perhaps neither is the dignity that once defined this company. But one person preserved it, even when my own son could not. Regina." His eyes softened as he said her name. "You weren't born into this family, but you wore its burdens more gracefully than anyone. I watched you work late into nights no one noticed. I saw you raise the man who forgot how to honor you. And I saw you never once ask for credit." Dominic's voice took a firmer tone. "Vincent, my son, if you're listening, I hope this reminds you that loyalty outweighs ego. You let greed and vanity cloud your judgment. You let someone else whisper away your inheritance. And Sabrina," he paused, "you've walked into a house built by others. I hope you find your own bricks someday." Then he turned his eyes back to the camera, his expression gentle. "Regina, the company is yours now. Do with it what you always did, quietly, wisely, and with grace. You never had to scream to lead. I'm proud to leave it in your hands." The screen faded to black. The boardroom stayed silent, the weight of Dominic's words hanging like fog. Regina sat composed, but a single tear slipped down her cheek. Not for the power, but for the man who had finally seen her worth. There was a moment of collective paralysis, as if time had folded in on itself. Jordan stood once more. In line with Dominic Martin's legal authority and binding shareholder directives, I confirm that 100% of Martin's global holdings is now registered under Mrs. Regina Martin's. A few board members clapped, hesitant at first, then more earnestly, those who had worked beside Regina in quieter years, now emboldened by the truth. Vincent stared at the table, lips parted, but no words came out. This can't be legal, he finally muttered. Jordan replied evenly, "Your father anticipated you might say that. Every clause is notarized. You signed the annual resolutions without reading the attachments. It's legal, and it's final." Sabrina stood in protest. "This is outrageous. You can't just hand over everything to a woman who doesn't even come here anymore." Regina rose. "You're right, Sabrina. I stopped coming when dignity stopped being welcomed in these halls. But you should have asked who lit the lamps you're so busy posing under." She stepped forward slowly, her tone measured. "You may have laughed at my silence. You may have thought I was gone. But the foundation of this company has always been mine. Brick by brick, speech by silence, idea by dismissal." Sabrina opened her mouth to retort, but Regina cut her off, eyes steel. "You thought I lost everything. But darling, I was just letting go of what didn't belong in my future." She turned to the board. "Let's proceed. I believe we have a company to rebuild with integrity." The room erupted, not in noise, but in a kind of reverence. Sabrina sat down, stunned. Vincent, eyes hollow, finally understood. The woman he cast aside was the one holding every card. Jordan cleared his throat and reached for the intercom. "Please have Mr. Hughes from security come to the boardroom." At first, no one moved until the doors opened and two suited guards entered with professional calm. Sabrina stood up, her voice loud and incredulous. "You can't be serious. This is a public humiliation." Vincent rose too, his voice taut. "There's no need for this. She can walk out on her own." Jordan didn't blink. "Ms. Cole no longer has security clearance. As per new ownership protocol, all non-board affiliates must vacate the premises immediately. Any attempt to remove files or access restricted areas will be treated as corporate trespassing." Sabrina looked from Vincent to Regina, then back to Jordan, her painted smile now trembling. "I built visibility for this company. I gave it a new image." Regina stood slowly, her voice cool as steel. "You gave it chaos. You turned the conference room into a catwalk and strategy meetings into vanity parades. This company didn't need a new image. It needed its soul back." Sabrina scoffed. "You just can't stand that I replaced you." Regina's gaze held steady. "Darling, you didn't replace me. You simply warmed my seat. Now get up." Security flanked Sabrina. She jerked away, grabbed her bag, and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this," she hissed. Regina replied calmly, "No, I regret not removing you sooner." As the doors closed behind her, the boardroom exhaled, every person realizing they had just witnessed the shift of an empire. Vincent sat back down slowly, the weight of his silence finally heavier than his pride. That night, Vincent didn't go home. He sat alone in the parking garage, staring at the steering wheel as the silence swallowed him. He had watched his mistress escorted out of the building, heard his father call him a disappointment, and witnessed the woman he underestimated rise without lifting a finger. The empire he thought he led had never truly belonged to him, and now he knew that. He finally drove to the house, but hesitated at the door. Regina was in the living room, a soft lamp casting golden light on her as she typed on her laptop. She looked up once, then returned to her work. He stood quietly, his voice hoarse. "Can I speak to you?" She didn't respond immediately. When she did, it was without looking at him. "Depends. Are you ready to tell the truth, or just ready to feel better?" He walked in slowly and sat across from her. "I didn't know. About the will. About what Dad did. I didn't know he'd give it all to you." Regina shut the laptop gently. "It's not about what he gave me. It's about what you took without asking, respect, trust, credit." He leaned forward, his voice cracking. "I thought you were safe, that you'd always be there. I never imagined I could lose you." She met his gaze. That's the problem, Vincent. I was never meant to be your safety net. I was your partner, and you made me invisible. His shoulders sagged. I don't know how to fix this. Regina's eyes softened just slightly. Then don't try to fix me. Fix yourself. That's where the healing begins. He sat there broken while she rose to go upstairs, leaving him alone in the ruins of his ego. In the days that followed, Vincent tried. He didn't bring flowers or offer empty words. Instead, he asked to speak with Jordan about the company transition. He showed up to board meetings without fanfare and stayed quiet. He apologized to longtime staff privately, sincerely. One afternoon, he found Regina in the rooftop garden of the Martins building. I've been going to counseling, he said. Twice a week. She nodded without surprise. You needed that years ago. He chuckled weakly. Yeah. I think I feared that therapy would make me confront the man I really was. Regina leaned on the railing, looking out at the city. And now, Vincent exhaled, now I fear I might have buried the man I should have been. She didn't respond right away. The silence said more than any sympathy ever could. He turned toward her, his voice low. I know I betrayed more than our vows. I betrayed our purpose, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, I'm not running from what I did anymore. Regina looked at him, her expression unreadable. Good, because forgiveness isn't a door I open out of guilt. It's a bridge you build, brick by brick, with consistency, humility, and time. Vincent swallowed. Would you ever walk across that bridge? She paused, then replied, maybe. But I won't meet you in the middle until I know you've reached the other side on your own. Then she walked past him, down the stairs, leaving him once again in stillness, but this time with direction. Months passed, and Vincent's transformation wasn't loud. It was slow, deliberate, and often painful. He stepped down from day-to-day operations entirely and joined a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, quietly offering guidance while confronting his own failures. He never asked Regina for her attention again, only gave her space, showed up where it mattered, and remained silent when it didn't. Staff began to see the change too. He started by listening, truly listening, to those he once dismissed. I thought leadership was noise, he admitted to a young intern one afternoon. Turns out it's clarity. The intern, unaware of the full story, simply nodded, but the words stuck. Vincent didn't try to win back control. He focused on earning back character. One Sunday afternoon, he visited Regina at the new leadership summit she had launched, an initiative for women in business. She stood before the audience, poised and graceful, delivering a keynote on vision, ethics, and resilience. When she stepped off stage, he was waiting near the refreshment table, holding a gift box. I didn't come to interrupt, he said. Just to say thank you. She raised a brow. For what? He opened the box, a pair of worn cufflinks she once gave him during their early years. For these, and for being the mirror I kept avoiding. She looked down at the box for a moment, then back at him. You're still building the bridge, Vincent. He nodded. I know, I'll keep building. Even if you never walk across, she smiled, soft but firm. Then keep building with honor. That's what this world needs more of. 1 year later, the Martins Global Holdings building bore a new inscription at its entrance. Founded on vision, restored by integrity. Inside the company's newly renovated boardroom, Regina stood at the head of the table, surrounded by a diverse group of young women and seasoned executives. She had not only retained the company, she had rebuilt it into a symbol of ethical leadership. Her portrait now hung beside Dominic's, a quiet but permanent reminder that legacy wasn't always about blood. It was about character. As the meeting concluded, she walked through the corridors, staff nodding respectfully, interns lighting up in her presence. She carried her bag, her smile, and her sense of peace like armor, but no longer for defense. Now it was simply who she had become. At home that evening, she lit a candle in the garden and sat beneath the stars. Rebecca joined her with 2 cups of tea. So, this is the end of the storm, she said. Regina shook her head with a serene smile. No, Bex. It's the start of the calm I built myself. They laughed softly, the kind of laughter that didn't carry pain anymore. In the distance, Vincent arrived quietly to pick up some documents. He nodded at her through the window, respectful, distant, no longer entitled. She nodded back, not with bitterness, not with longing, just understanding. She had forgiven him, but on her terms. And as she leaned back into her chair, she whispered to herself, I never lost everything. I just waited for the world to catch up to what I already was. And for the first time in a long time, she felt whole. Here's the Bible verse, Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11, Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart. This verse speaks to Regina's slow but purposeful rise. Her time came, not through force, but through divine timing. What looked like loss was simply preparation for restoration. Moral of the story: never confuse silence with weakness, nor patience with surrender. True strength is revealed not when you fight to be seen, but when you wait for truth to reveal itself, and it always does. Regina didn't seek revenge or rush justice. She trusted time, integrity, and her quiet confidence. And in the end, what was hers found its way back to her, rightfully, completely, and on her terms. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.